Special Agent Easter not be present for this as well?
Well, I assume there's going to be some testimony presented.
Well, he's the only one that can testify to this.
Well, is this, are we going to have a hearing right now?
So, yeah.
Oh, okay.
The record will reflect the presence of counsel for the parties. The defendant is present. The jury is not present. And our witnesses return to the witness stand. Good afternoon. Do you understand your cylinder?
Yes, Your Honor, I do.
Thank you. There's a question concerning the records that are being presented and the records that were provided in discovery. And so the court has indicated to the parties the court's going to conduct a hearing concerning that. Mr. Rivera, you may proceed.
Thank you. Special Agent Easter, just to get some background, when you first prepared, I guess, you first prepared a draft of your analysis early on in this case, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And approximately when was that?
I believe December of 2014.
And in that draft, was there information with respect to, and I want to make sure I say this word right, with respect to the Smith information with the records you received from AT&T through the Maui Police Department?
Can you rephrase that first part? I didn't catch the term you used.
Okay. Was there either an incomplete portion of the record that involved a sector direction involving the records on February 9th of 2014?
Yes. After that analysis, as I learned that this case was going to trial, I reviewed that analysis again. In that review with the peer review, it was determined that there was a discrepancy in the azimuth. In fact, in the CDRs, the phone records themselves, you would typically see the azimuth. There was no azimuth for that sector. And when reviewing the tower list, the national tower list, there wasn't a sector orientation or azimuth in there either. And so when I realized that from that review, I made contact with AT&T and asked them, could you please tell us what the azimuth is for that sector?
Okay, the azimuth, is that the word? Okay. Can you spell that, please?
It's AZIMUTH.
And when you said you made contact with an AT&T personnel, could you describe that contact?
Yes, I sent an email to the custodian of records, their lead analyst, Carlos Torrejon in Florida, and I emailed him that tower's latitude, longitude, and the CID, which was 2054, and I said, can you please determine the azimuth for this cell site on or around February 9th of 2014. And he responded with an email that it is 40 degrees.
Yeah, I'm going to object to that last part. It's hearsay.
No, again, that's what he would rely on as an expert doing the analysis.
Given the nature of this hearing, the objection is overruled.
And when you said CID, is that the cell identification?
Yes.
And so when you mentioned earlier, Special Agent, that when you found or when you were informed that this case was going to trial, that's when you did a peer review on this. Do you recall approximately when that was done?
Well, the peer review was, I can't remember exactly when I was notified, but it was done in early August.
And then you updated this on August 25th of this year?
Yes, that's when the email correspondence took place, because I think I was notified maybe a couple days prior to that, that this was actually, a trial was actually taking place.
And with respect to all the other information with respect to the records and data you received from the Maui Police Department, who got it from AT&T, everything with the exception of the azimuth information you provided, is all that other information unchanged?
Yes, that was the only azimuth or sector that I identified that needed to be corrected.
And do you recall when you provided this to the state?
On August 25th.
You're not moving for the questions.
Mr.
So would it be accurate to say that you relied on this, I guess, updated information relative to this azimuth in order to form your opinions, at least relative to that contained in page, I guess, 10 of your updated report?
I don't actually remember what's contained on page 10. I'm sorry, there's so many pages. But if that's referring to the February 9th and that updated azimuth, yes.
It does, for what it's worth.
Okay.
Okay, so let's just make the record clear. Relative to the analysis of the historical cell site, I guess data from February 9th, would it be that particular analysis that was affected by this updated azimuth?
Yes.
And I guess this azimuth you obtained from who?
From AT&T.
And I guess there's a particular live person that you would have gotten that from?
Yes, Carlos Torrejon is the lead analyst for AT&T.
And it would be your testimony that you relied on that updated information from that person in order to update the information that you provided in your final report?
Yes, well, specifically, there's one call on that page that would have changed.
And but for that updated information, you would not have made that change? Is that fair to say?
Correct, I would not have, because I wouldn't have known that it was what the accurate azimuth was.
And would it be accurate to say that you never forwarded the information relative to the updated azimuth information with any prosecutor for this case?
No, in fact, the mapping reflects on 8/25, which is the same day I learned about it. I updated the mapping to include that and provided it to the prosecution.
And that was on August 25th, 2016?
Yes, sir.
On the condition that we're going to be talking about the other one, I guess we're piecemealing this. I have no further questions relative to this February.
Mr.
Yeah, no, I think this is taking a while. Once you receive the correct coordinates or the degrees for the azimuth, did you make, I guess, cosmetic changes to some of the subsequent slides with respect to the data?
Yes, some of the labeling aesthetics changed in the sense that I was asked to make sure that we could see both Carly Scott's residence as well as the defendant's residence on the map were realistic. And the labels that identify the sectors, I used one label even though there may have been two sectors to identify the time and period. And instead, I took that one label and broke it up so that it's easier visually just to see what label corresponds to which sector. So we don't have to keep looking at the record to say, well, that call was this sector, that call was that sector. So it's just a more easier on the eyes.
So when you split up the labels that contain more than one sector and split it into two labels with two different sectors, did that change any of the information?
No, the same information is contained. It's just depicted in two labels to make it easier to visualize.
Okay, you know, if I may publish some slides for the court, just as they will cover.
Proceed.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, now, for purposes of this hearing, I'm showing you what already is in evidence. On the right side, this is part of, I believe this is page 10 of State's Exhibit 388, which,
It's actually not in evidence.
oh, I'm sorry, which has been
Offered.
moved,
yeah.
offered, but ruling is reserved at this time. And on the left side, we have page 10 of the December 10th, 2015 diagram. Do you recognize what we have here?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay, can you describe the change you made with the, first starting with the azimuth and then the split of the sectors?
Your Honor, may I
You may.
go ahead?
You may step down, you may use the, you can sit down to that monitor and use the pointer.
So, Your Honor, the one on the left is dated from December of 2015. The one on the right is what is being, I don't want to say proffered, but provided for today. And it has the date of August 25th, which is the date that I learned of the azimuth change. We can see in the records up here, I don't know if this is on your screen. Is it on your screen? Is that at the top, the activity here, which is a text message, identifies that it used CID 2054. Well, in the records it detailed no azimuth. And you can see that there is no azimuth identified for 2054 on the map. This azimuth is for the tower 22056, and this is for 22054. And so when I learned of the azimuth for that outbound text, I then updated the mapping. And you can see now that this time period included 9:49 p.m. to 6:33 a.m. on the following day of the 10th. I split this map because now I know the sector orientation, and I just only showed that activity that occurred at 9:49 and 11:20 p.m. And so in order to make that easier to illustrate, I took the one text box and created two text boxes. So this text box relates to tower 22056. This text box relates to 22054. And then the remaining calls that are in this, that were on this slide, are just reflected in the following slide, and they appear the same as it does here.
And I'm going to show you page 11 of part of Exhibit 388, which has been marked for identification. And again, that's under the August 25th, 2016 slide to the right. You said that, are those the remainder of the data information?
Yes, and you can see that the same tower is being selected, and the same sectors are still being illustrated that were previously. But again, as I mentioned as I was up there, Your Honor, is I did add the labels for the specific locations where relevant on the map.
Okay, I have no further questions with respect to this area.
Mr. Upwell.
So would you agree that in terms of the difference in the sectors in the two pictures is a result of the updated azimuth being factored in then?
The diagram on the right?
Yes.
Yes, it is reflecting the updated azimuth.
I have no further questions relative to this.
Let's bring that back up.
I'm sorry.
In terms of your analysis then, you've touched upon the fact that that involved one cellular communication, that being a text message. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, Your Honor. A text message specifically on the February 9th at 9:49 p.m. On this slide. I believe there is another slide. I don't know if that was brought up.
Is that this one?
Well, the phone does use tower 2054 on another day. And I believe that would be reflected on the 10th or 11th, but I'm not sure if we're going to get to those many dates. I know there were some objections.
It was up to the 12th.
Okay. What page is this? 10th? Could you go one more slide, please? On the right. One more. And so this also shows the reflection of the updated azimuth for the events that occurred at, on February 10th at 5:19 and 5:49, that updated azimuth as well. And those were also text messages, Your Honor, so 3 text messages.
Let's go back to the night of the February 9th, 2014, and one text message. In substance, is that, what does that change amount to?
So when I look at this, when I see the phone selecting 22056, I looked at the records in the sense that the records pick that tower and sector over 60% of the time, meaning that is its most popular site and sector, which in my experience is consistent with where a person would be or live. And so when I look at this sector, 2054, the phone only selected that 0.5% to 0.9% depending on voice or SMS. So that's a site and sector that the phone would not regularly select. And the days that it did select it was one time on the 1st, and then the other times was the 9th, the 10th, and the 11th. And so my conclusion from looking at this is we have call activity that's consistent off of a site and sector that is consistent with where a phone would live, or a person would live, which is in the area of the residence, and then picking a site that's not consistent with the area that they live. It doesn't mean that they couldn't have been there, because we can see on this map that this sector still is providing coverage out into the area of both the residence and out along Hana. So I can't exclude that the residence is also a possible location for that azimuth, or for that sector.
Thank you. And you folks have, do you have another area that you need to address?
Mayor, I think Special Agent covered the other, about how the correct azimuth affected the other 2 calls as well.
Mm-hmm. The total of 3.
Total of 3, yes.
I have some follow-up relative to
Certainly.
the second one.
Sure.
And would that be in reference to February 10th calls between 5:16 and 5:49? Is that what that's in reference to?
Yes, but if I could be clear that, let's not get caught in saying everything's a call. Sometimes I do that too, but these are actually text messages.
I guess communications, would that encompass both?
I think that's an easy answer, yes.
I think Mr. Rivera asked you a question where he characterized the changes in that particular analysis as cosmetic. Remember being asked that?
Not specifically about the sectors, but more about the labels being, as you term, cosmetic.
Okay, so in terms of anything cosmetic, that would refer to the labels. Would you agree that in terms of, after factoring in the updated azimuths relative to that analysis, that there have been substantive changes in that as well?
Yes, I don't know that my conclusions are much different, because having not known it, I wouldn't be able to provide a conclusion at all of where that sector would provide coverage. But now looking at it and knowing it, my conclusion is still at that time that the phone is still likely in an area of coverage that does include the residence of the defendant, but also includes the area along Hana Highway.
And I guess you mentioned one other factor in there, and correct me if I'm wrong, in terms of the percentage of times that I guess it goes to one sector or the other. Is that part of the analysis as well?
Yes, but we have to make sure, so these are things that I'm offering, but the questions, so the answer to that question is a different answer, is The reality of it is the 22056 that the phone picks over 60% of the time is a 3G tower. And your phone is typically set to go to the 3G sectors and not down to 2G. So it's not overwhelmingly surprising that the phone is picking the 2G tower less. But yet it still does provide me some information that why did it pick a 2G tower now when it's supposed to be picking a 3G? It's because now it's in an area where there likely is no good 3G coverage, but in an area that has 2G coverage. So that's important to me, especially if I was looking for somebody. Now I need to start framing in my mind that they're in an area that there's likely not 3G coverage, but typically 2G. So it really changes the way I'm searching for somebody in real time and helps frame some of my conclusions historically.
And I think you mentioned a particular percentage. Was it like 60% that you mentioned?
Yes, for
To that
both.
one particular sector?
Sorry to interrupt. Both for SMS and voice, this site in sector 22056 is selected by the phone over 60% for over 60% of its voice and SMS events.
Okay, and I guess how do you come up with that percentage number?
Okay, I do the math in it, and so I know that there were 3,608 text messages that completed with a tower selection. And I know that there were 885 voice messages that connected to a tower. So then I identify how many times of those calls the phone selected that site, and I do the division of selection versus total numbers to become a percentage.
Okay, and did you provide any of that, I guess, calculations to the prosecution in terms of the work you did to get to your results?
The math?
I guess that would be math, yeah.
No, I didn't.
I don't think I have any further questions at this time. Thank you.
And Special Agent, the numbers you just gave us, the amount of SMS, the text messages as well as the voice, was all of that provided to you by the Maui Police Department through the AT&T records?
Yes, I took the records and did the math.
Any other questions, Mr. Poole?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. I guess for at this point you could wait outside.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Mr. Poole.
My argument, Your Honor, would be that at least relative to the two analysis that were testified about, which resulted in substantive changes based on the updated azimuth information given to Special Agent Easter from an AT&T custodian of record, our ultimate, I guess, objection or disability of that would be that this comes down to late discovery again. We got an updated report sometime last week, and if I'm not mistaken, it was late last week, and apparently it's based on this updated azimuth information, which was never provided to the defense, and we know that because it was apparently wasn't even provided to the state. I think that to change the analysis as trial goes on based on information that's not provided to us is just a discovery violation and a violation of our rules or a ruling of our motions in limine. It's just one more example of late discovery where we have to play catch up. And unfortunately, the way this came down, being given this last week, the reality is this weekend was a very short weekend apparently because it was a hard time playing catch up on this one. Now that it's all come to the front that there were substantive changes based on an updated azimuth, and just to put that in context, the premise there is that the AT&T records were incomplete which adds to the 902 issue, which is still pending in front of the court. And so I think this adds to the 902 authenticity issue to begin with, the whole foundation of this person's analysis. But at the very least, relative to the analysis with the two substantive changes, we are asking that at the very least, those be excluded. I will represent that when we did get the draft last week, the newest final copy, I guess, and we asked Mr. Rivera, hey, are there any substantive changes to this? I think that the only thing that was responded was that it was a new draft and only had new labels. But come to find out, there are substantive changes based on an additional or updated azimuth, which is hearsay. We don't know the veracity of that, but we're here today having to trust that because we've been given no information about that prior to today.
Mr. Rivera.
You know, of over 1,200 records or pages provided to both to the Maui Police Department, to the state, and to Special Agent Michael Easter, to just have one incomplete, although it did make a change with respect to the final product, but that doesn't render the entire record incomplete or unreliable, or the entire record inaccurate as argued by the defense. That makes that one entry incomplete. And even if Special Agent Easter were to have taken a stand today, he would not be permitted or be able to knowingly provide incorrect or erroneous information. When he found that out, he provided the updated casting map to the state, and the state did meet or sit down with, and I'm not sure how much bearing this has, the state did finally sit down and meet with Special Agent Easter yesterday, Sunday, to go over, and at that time the state was unaware of an azimuth, I guess the lack of an azimuth in that particular instance. But again, he would testify anyway that it was erroneous, and he would have to make the correction whether it's on the stand or not, because the state would not be able to, again, provide erroneous information to the trier of fact. All of the information, though, Judge, the data, the cell tower information, that's all been previously provided. I'm not sure if counsel is trying to make an issue of whether or not that they were given the math and all the numbers and statistics that Special Agent Easter provided, but they could have done it themselves or through their expert. The state is saying that there was no prejudice in this area where it substantially affects the defense, because they're not, I mean, it is what it is, and if their expert's going to contest it, he's going to contest it, but the information is what it is, and the state's argument, or the state would submit that it wasn't changed, it wasn't altered because we thought there's something better, it was just corrected. And that's all we're looking at is a correction, and now the record is the way it should be.
When did you receive the updated report?
Your Honor, it shows that it was emailed to the state on August 25th. The state, and I think that's either a Thursday or Friday, the last Thursday in August.
Thursday.
Okay. And the state can't tell you when it first reviewed it, but I do know that the state did have a phone conference with Special Agent Michael Easter the following week.
Okay, when was that?
No, I don't have that recorded. I just know we spoke with Special Agent Easter the following week, and that was more in line of trying to secure his testimony, secure his appearance, because he was looking at 3 or 4 trials during the next 3 weeks. But I do know at some point that week the state did have a chance to review that letter or that information, and the following week, our records show that it was, and this is on September 7th, it was emailed first to council, and then later on printed copies are given to them towards the ending of the week.
And then you discovered the issue on September 11th?
Well, Sunday is the first time the state was informed of the term azimuth and had a discussion with that. That's correct. I think what the changes the state had requested for the August 25th draft was more to add some addresses or landmarks, which Special Agent Easter did on at least 3 or 4 of the slides.
And Mr. Uphold, just so I can understand your, one of the remarks you made related to the analysis with the 2 substantive changes. Specifically, what are you referring to?
Would be page 10, would be the first one.
Of
It relates to
what
February
exhibit?
9th.
Of what exhibit, please?
I'm sorry?
Of what exhibit?
Exhibit 388.
I'm being told it's exhibit 388, and it's relative to
Stage 388, page 10.
page 10. It's relating to the call records of February 9th, 9:49 p.m. to 11:20 p.m. and it just reflects 2 calls. And then the other analysis relates to what the same exhibit and page 14 thereof, relating to the records of February 10th, 5:16 p.m. to 5:49 p.m. Relative to the court's last questions to the state, I will note that, you know, in as much as the trigger apparently for Special Agent Easter's action in I guess, fortifying this report and making it more complete for trial was, I guess, according to him, notification that it was going to trial. Everybody's known that this case has been going to trial from the very least, at least January of 2016. How you can rely on saying, oh, I only knew August 25th of 2016 that this was going to trial, and then I decided to make corrections, it's just inappropriate under the circumstances.
Judge, like the state mentioned before, and the court can get this from Special Agent Easter, he was set for 3 or 4 trials. And as the court knows, oftentimes people are notified, and experts are notified and often called out because it didn't actually go. But he was between a rock and a hard place with that schedule.
We're not talking about him actually coming to court or anything. We're talking about him doing the updated analysis based on the azimuths, which apparently didn't take him very long if he decided to do it in late August and got it to the state in late August. This could have been done in January of 2016 is my point.
All right. With respect to this matter, what we actually have here is a discovery of a missing piece of information following peer review with the FBI. This having occurred on or about August 25th, 2016, as opposed to the prosecution being in receipt of discovery and failing to disclose it to the defense for a period of days, months, or years. the error was discovered, well, I shouldn't say the error, the missing information was discovered on August 25th, 2016. The witness, who obviously has a working relationship with the major providers in the United States, called the person that he goes to ask him for the azimuth information relative to the cell tower in question, was provided with that information and made the correction. And revised his report to reflect that. From what I've heard, it does not sound as to the court, and parties can correct me if I'm wrong, but in terms of an opinion, it doesn't change any of the opinions, and it hasn't changed any of the data of the particular electronic communications. It provides an additional information relative to the azimuth information concerning one cell tower. This seems to, from the record that's been developed, applies to all three of the questioned electronic communications. Those having occurred on one on February 9th and two on February 10th. So the court is going to decline to exclude this evidence. I will out of an abundance of caution, I will just indicate that may not be a part of the record, but the court quite some time ago, frankly I don't recall how long ago it was, but it was a long time ago, the court had authorized expenditure of funds for an expert in this field to the defense, for the defense. And the defense, obviously, as has been indicated, is in communication with their witness. If for some reason it's determined that this requires the defense to need more time to review this information, I'm going to be, I'll allow considerable leeway in that regard. It doesn't appear that that will be the case. Again, there doesn't seem to be anything in substance that's changing. But out of abundance of caution and just in the interest of fairness, I think that would be the appropriate way to proceed. Realistically, the prosecution still has quite a bit to present, and we also have pending a hearing relative to the drive to Hana with the defendant. And as I understand it, approximately 3 weeks of testimony from the prosecution before we even get to the defense case. But if I'm informed at any point that the defense needs additional time to react to this information, I'm going to provide that time. It may be that Special Agent Easter will have to be available for recall. And I'm going to have to make the schedule quite flexible with regard to that, to make sure that both sides, in particular the defense here, has the opportunity to react appropriately to what's been presented. Obviously, we're going to need to also have a witness address the azimuth information that was not included in the records provided to NPD relative to that one cell tower.
And then that was going to be my question. The court is not ruling relative to the 902 issue as it plays into this matter then, or this issue?
No, the 902 issue is yet to develop. And again, that relates to self-authentication. If they go into standard authentication, then that's a different analysis. So, at any rate, just in the interest of scheduling here, because I believe the authentication witnesses are going to be the other side of the country. I'm just asking the prosecution to please prepare for that ahead of time. Let Mr. Uppo and Mr. Nardi know what you're doing. You've listed representative from AT&T, and that undoubtedly is going to include this azimuth information. So I just want to make sure you folks keep each other informed. I don't think it's going to change anything in substance, but I just want to make sure you folks are informed of what's going on, and you need to let your witness or witnesses on the other side of the country know what you're thinking of doing so that they can make appropriate arrangements to be here. Or you can try the route of self-authentication, but it's going to have to, that obviously encompass the azimuth information too. So, at any rate, it sounds to me, I'm just trying to be practical here. What it sounds to me like is that you're going to be bringing in a witness or witnesses from the East Coast. And so the only thing I'm asking is that you just let me know when you're going to do it, and let Mr. Uppo know when you're going to do it, Mr. Nardi, so that we can plan accordingly. I think that's a reasonable request for the court to make.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
All right, we'll have Sergeant, I'm sorry, we had Sergeant Vegas on the stand. We now have Special Agent Easter on the stand. My apologies. And we'll have him return to the courtroom. We'll have the jury return to the courtroom. The record will reflect the presence of the members of the jury. Thank you very much for your cooperation, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate it. And we're going to continue now with the testimony of Special Agent Easter, and you understand the first time.
I do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You may continue with your examination.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. And Your Honor, may Special Agent Easter step down and get an approach and large
You may
monitor.
use it. And you may use it after it's one.
Okay, now, Special Agent Easter, we're on page 4 of, and Your Honor, permission to publish State's Exhibit 388 on
Permission.
We're last on page 4 of State's Exhibit 388. Can you start by telling us what we're seeing right here?
From the top?
Whichever way is easier for
Okay.
you to describe it.
I think before we took the break, we were talking about a lot of these slides are going to look very similar in the header. And so I won't belabor that again. I think we all understand what a header is providing us. But below that is records from AT&T, specifically the cell phone records for a number ending in 4842. And I can describe the columns if you'd like me to.
Yes, please.
Okay. So within the records, we have an item number, and the item number is referring to what sequence that shows up in the records. You're going to see numbers slightly out of sequence because I've made the SNP show both text and voice at the same time. So you're going to see the item number slightly out of sequence, but it would be in order, in the order that that text message showed up or that voice call took place. Okay. Connection date and time. AT&T provides that to us in UTC. And so for us on the island, we would have to convert that to Hawaii time. And so that requires a subtraction of 10 hours from UTC, or Coordinated Universal Time.
Can I interject?
Yes, sir.
When you say UTC, what do you mean?
So UTC is kind of the new phase of GMT. And this idea that we needed a standard throughout the world that all clocks could be set to. And so the standard that's utilized throughout the world is UTC, or Coordinated Universal Time. And it's everybody has an offset from UTC. So if you're on the West Coast, you would have either 7 or 8 hours offset. Hawaii has an offset of 10 hours, so minus 10 hours from UTC.
And I'm sorry, Special Agent, just to ask you this, is Hawaii's 10-hour UTC difference, is that the same throughout the entire year?
So because Hawaii doesn't observe daylight savings, you're always 10 hours. That's why I mentioned the West Coast can be 7 or 8, because the West Coast still does observe daylight savings.
And please continue.
So as we move forward, seizure time, you're only going to see seizure time when it is a voice call, not the text message, but a voice. And seizure is that moment from when I've pressed send to the time that I'm actually connected. So there's that air time of the time it takes for that call to be set up with the end user. So those of you that have made calls will hear that ringing tone. Well, the phone may not actually be ringing to the other person. It's just making you feel good that something has actually happened, okay? And so when the person answers and you say, why'd you let it ring 10 times? They're like, it only rang once. It may have. It may have. So the seizure time is what we see in there. Originating number, that's the number making the call or sending the text. Terminating number is the person receiving the call or receiving the text. The elapsed time is actually the time that the call took place. So we talked about seizure time. Elapsed time is how long that call duration lasted. And then finally, number dialed. You'll only see number dialed on a voice call because you're not actually pressing numbers into a phone when you send a text message, right? We're only going to see dialed numbers there. The IMEI, which is the next column, is the International Mobile Equipment Identifier. And so that's unique to your device. It identifies this type of device that the individual will be using. Okay? It's like a serial number for your phone. The next is the IMSI, the International Mobile Subscriber ID. And that is unique to the subscriber. It's really how the network identifies you on an AT&T network is by your NZ. Okay? And that helps us identify certain things. And as we move forward, the description, we have, for a voice call, you're going to see M to M. And when it's a big M, it's an AT&T phone. When it's a little M, it's someone else's cell phone. So Verizon, T-Mobile, they call them little M's. Okay, AT&T's the big M. For text message, it'll be either in or out. Okay, outbound or inbound. And then lastly, the cell location column. This has several pieces of information that are useful. Is the first two data sets that are separated by a /, if you guys can see that from where you're at.
Would it help if
Can we zoom in on that?
Sure.
Yeah, that works. Cell location. The first set of digits before the / 50996 is the LAC, or location area code. And an easy way to think of a LAC is a grouping of towers. Okay? We all live in a zip code, right? Within our zip code are numerous addresses, right? Same is true of a LAC. Within a LAC, there are lots of cell phone towers. So how do we find that specific cell phone tower? We do that by looking at the next data set, which is the CID, or cell ID. And so this unique number, 22056, is what identifies that unique tower and that unique sector that we talked about in that piece of pie that we looked at earlier, right? That number right there is identifying the unique tower and sector that is not replicated or duplicated anywhere else in the network. So that's very unique. The next is the longitude, which we can see. Then the latitude, which gives us the location of the tower, which allows us to plot it on a map. And then finally, the 250. The 250 is the azimuth, or orientation. And if you're not familiar with azimuth or orientation, sometimes the easiest way to look at it or think of it is a clock. And we have one in the courtroom. It's hard for you guys to see, but it's behind you. And so when you look at a clock, at 12 o'clock would be up at the top of the clock. That's north, or 0 degrees. And then 3 o'clock would be to the right or to the east. That's at 90 degrees. At the bottom of the clock would be 6 o'clock, or south. That's 180 degrees. And then out to the west, or 9 o'clock, would be 270 degrees. And every 5 minutes, or every hour hand, is 30 degrees. So 0, 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, and so on. Okay? So that azimuth is not now helping me understand what direction the antennas are facing on that CID that we learned about.
And in this instance, Special Agent Easter, for the date of February 8th, from 3:32 p.m. to 6:25 p.m., did you pull out the phone number of 359-4842 corresponding to that time frame?
Yes.
Okay. And what was the purpose of that?
Well, I was asked by the prosecution to review a specific time period as it related to events that were under investigation.
And can you describe, if this is your next step, can you describe what we're looking to the bottom of the phone numbers and the information, the phone number and the information that you just described?
But to the bottom is the map, if that's what you're making reference to. The map is going to have for us a few things. And one is the address of 225 Kalipo in Haiku. All right? We can see that it points to the yellow icon. I also have the address of 10 Ahuwali and Makawa, and it also has a same yellow icon. Okay? Now what we also see on the map are all the other AT&T towers that are available to an AT&T phone. Those are all the blue dots. Those are AT&T towers that are on your icon on Maui. The one that was selected by the phone 4842 is the one that's towards the top of Haleakala. Okay? And this tower, believe it or not, is up around 6,600 feet. So it's really far up there. And so it really proposes a unique analysis for me, because now I have to take into account a tower that is far up in the air and broadcasting down to a large area of the island. So it becomes difficult when looking at that one tower to be more precise of where a phone could be, because we have a tower so high broadcasting in such a large area, right? So my next analysis when looking at this was to identify how often does the phone select that tower, but specifically what is the most popular. And the reason I do that as an investigator is I tend to find that the most popular tower sector is where somebody lives. And so that helps frame my opinion. And so when I look at the totality of the records, over the course of the records, which was from December of 2013 to March of 2014, I noticed that this tower, and specifically the sector...
Your Honor, I'm going to object. Assumes facts, not an evidence.
You know, these are the records that he's looked at. I can lay for the foundation that those records are the ones he received through the Maui Police Department from AT&T.
All right, and I'll overrule the objection again, subject to further evidence related to authentication and foundation, and relevance, of course.
Now, Sergeant, I keep calling you Sergeant, I'm sorry.
I'll just make one other objection for the record, that we were not given this opinion until today. No previous discussion.
And again, Your Honor, the discovery was given prior to this, because the records speak for themselves.
The objection is overruled.
Thank you.
We've covered that area.
Now, the records you're referring to, are the records you just provided the dates for from December of 2013 to March of 2014 with respect to phone number 808-359-4842. Are these the records that you received from the Maui Police Department?
Yes, they are.
The same records that you referred to earlier?
Yes.
And can you tell us, with respect to those records, what, if anything, did you do to try to determine, with respect to which was the most popular cell tower when you reviewed those records?
Sure. Because the records were provided to me by Maui Police Department, it's rather common for me to analyze the totality of the records. I know that it was requested that I specifically look at specific times, but for me to be better at what I'm doing, which is come to a conclusion about the story or the life of that phone, I have to look at all the records that were provided to me. Okay? And so in doing that, I'm looking to see what does the phone like to pick the best? Because we talked about that. The phone is in charge of picking it. So if I understand the phone likes best, and I know the pattern habits of most of us, which is to call from where you live or the area that you live in, it helps me come to conclusions about where a phone could have been or would likely have been when it's selecting its most popular. And that's why I did the analysis of that. And it's simply adding up the records that are provided. It's math.
And can you tell us what was what were the results when you did that analysis?
So when I looked at that analysis, the sector that we see...
So I'm going to object as to lack of foundation, Your Honor. And if we may approach on that, I have a particular objection relative to that.
All right. You may return to the witness stand. Thank you very much. And the last question which you began to answer was, can you tell us what were the results when you did the analysis? And then you began by saying that when you looked at the analysis, the sector that we see, and then we left off with, we stopped at an objection, if that helps.
Am I going forward with my answer?
Yes.
Let's go finish that.
Yeah, let's finish that,
Okay.
and then we're going to adjourn for the day.
Okay. So my response, or my conclusion rather, is that when I looked at that, I identified that the sector that faces at 250 degrees, which we talked about, which will either be 22056 or 2053 as we look at the records, is the most popular. And it was the most popular. It's almost, or let's say this easier, approximately 62% of all voice and all SMS occurred from that sector that faces at 250 degrees. So that's helping frame my opinion that the phone finds that tower and sector the most popular.
And you're not, stop
Alright.
with the questions.
Yes, all right, we will adjourn for the day. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your cooperation today, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 10 a.m. Please keep in mind my cautionary instructions here remain in effect, and have a nice evening. Thank you so much.